A reading from 1 Corinthians chapter 3. For when one says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos, are you not mere human beings? What, after all, is Apollos, and what is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord assigned to each. I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God makes it grow. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. The one who plants and the one who waters have a common purpose, and they will each be rewarded according to their own labor. For we are co-workers in God's service. You are God's field, God's building. By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder, and someone else is building on it. But each one should build with care, for no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. If anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built on the foundation survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, but yet will be saved, even though only as one escaping through the flames. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Pastors are not hired, they are called. And in my call agreement, this employment document that I have with you here at the church that was signed 15 years ago, in the first paragraph it says that St. Anthony Park United Church of Christ calls me to, quote, become a minister, pastor, and teacher of this church. In last Sunday's sermon, I preached on Simeon's song, the beautiful song from the Gospel according to Luke about departing in peace. That was a pastoral sermon. This Sunday, I'm moving to teacher. The UCC designates today Racial Justice Sunday, and of course it's also Black History Month. So I am taking this opportunity to teach. Okay, here we go. That is the trajectory of race in the United States of America. And I'm going to start here with slavery. We know it goes before that, but this morning, because of Black History Month, I'm containing it to Black and African American history. So yeah, David, come on down. People were kidnapped, tortured, killed, abused in body, mind, and spirit on purpose. Then we made some progress. We had the Civil War. The war to, quote, free the slaves. Then about 100 years later, we had MLK and the Civil Rights Movement. He said, I might not get there with you. And then, lo and behold, we elect a POTUS who's a black man. So like, wow, we've done a really good job. Or have we? There certainly is progress, right? However, I would say there's always a backlash. So I want to stay here for a moment with slavery. If you do not know this book, go to the bookstore, buy it online. The Warmth of Other Suns, Isabel Wilkerson. Now, don't be intimidated by its tome-like look. This is an incredible book. Raise your hand if you know it and have read it. Very good. So, she is a historian. She writes beautifully. She's a woman of color. She writes about the black migration from southern states to northern states in the U.S., and she does this by using 3 individuals' stories. So it's part history and then part almost like a novel, where you read about these 3 people making their way north. And there's one page in here that I am going to read because I have never read anything like it before or since, and it just absolutely took my breath away. So one of the people in the book who is highlighted is a woman named Ida May. So Ida May was a picker of cotton. And this is what is written. The strongest of men like George, could pick 2 or 3 times their weight in cotton. 400 pounds gave a man bragging rights for anybody's field. A woman could hold up her head if she picked 100. It was a mean enough world that people got desperate. For one thing, for day pickers, there was the money. For another, there was their pride. And then there was the fact that they did not want to be there in the first place. Some people collected rocks, hid them in their pockets, and threw them into their sack, all to add extra weight. Some were the first out in the morning, picking early while the dew was on the bud, which meant much of the weight was water. It was a trick they could get away with unless the planter set the cotton out in the sun to dry it out, which some did. When those who were so inclined did not outright lard their sacks, they helped themselves to the peaches and berries on the edges of the boss's cotton and gave themselves a raise for breaking their backs in the field. Many years later, the people would stand up to water hoses and sheriff's dogs to be treated as equal. But for now, the people resisted in silent, everyday rebellions that would build up to a storm in mid-century. And I had never really read or learned about what exactly it took to pick cotton. Here are the details. It was like picking 100 pounds of feathers, 100 pounds of lint dust. It was one of the most backbreaking forms of stoop labor ever known. It took some 70 bowls to make a single pound of cotton, which meant Ida May would have to pick 7,000 bowls to reach 100 pounds. It meant reaching past the branches into the cotton flower and pulling a soft lock of cotton the size of a walnut out of its pod, doing this 7,000 times, and turning around and doing the same thing the next day and the day after that. The hands got cramped from the repetitive motion of the picking, the fingers fairly locked in place and calloused from the pricks of the barbell, 5-pointed cockleburs that cupped each precious bowl. The work was not so much hazardous as it was mind-numbing and endless, requiring them to pick from the moment the sun peeked over the tree line to the moment it fell behind the horizon and they could no longer see. After 10 or 12 hours, the pickers could barely stand up for all the stooping. Ida May had watched people do it all her life and knew how it was done, but when it came time to actually go out and pick it, she would look up and see everybody else far down the row. At weighing time, she would empty her sack on the scale and she would never get to 3 digits. And above her was an entire economy she could not see, but which ruled her days and determined the contours of her life. There were bankers, planters, merchants, warehouse clerks, fertilizer wholesalers, seed sellers, plow makers, mule dealers, and gin owners. A good crop and a high price made not much improvement to the material discomforts of Ida May's existence, but it meant that a planter's wife could begin to dream of a new carpet in her parlor, and a piano, and a salesman of farm implements could be lavish with more expensive cigars than he smoked last year. And on Wall Street, there were futures and commodity traders wagering on what the cotton she had yet to pick might go for next year. There were businessmen in Chicago needing Oxford shirts, socialites in New York and Philadelphia wanting lace curtains and organdy evening gowns. And closer to home, closer than one dared to contemplate, there were Klansmen needing their white cotton robes and hoods. Isabel Wilkerson. So I would say that instead of a straight line, it's more like this shape. There's movement forward and then a backlash. There's movement forward and then a backlash, right? Movement forward and then another blowback. And we keep trying. Forward, back, and forward and back. This is also true for women's rights, LGBTQ rights, right? Progress, blowback. Okay, so anti-racism and dismantling racism is one of the spiritual priorities of the Minnesota Conference United Church of Christ. And there are many ways we can do this. We have done some work here, we've read books, we've had conversations, and so on. It is spiritual work, it is soul work, and we are implored by the conference to do our part. So yesterday, I spent a lot of hours on Zoom with the board of directors and the staff of the conference. We are engaging in a long-term relationship with an organization called Crossroads and doing anti-racism training. And this was helpful. Not a whole lot of it was new to me, but this was helpful yesterday. Instead of looking for a definition of racism, Crossroads says there's an equation, putting it in terms of math, okay? And they say racism is an equation of, there's a person, right? Or a bunch of people, the individual or a collection of people, our own internalized prejudice and bigotry. Plus, here's the plus sign, you got math. I'm just gonna draw like a little building with a roof and a door. That stands for institutions. Healthcare, education, housing, transportation, financing, banking, religion, all these institutions. So the individual or collective prejudice and bigotry plus the baked-in institutional racism that works against people of color, that is what, at least for Crossroads purposes, they call racism. What else would you add to institutionalized? Law enforcement, the justice system, education, transit, all the institutions that help our culture work and click along, right? Now, they're not all, but they are built on white, patriarchal, nationalist, supremacist ways of being. Okay, so if you think you are not prejudiced or bigoted, think again. Anybody who grew up in the United States of America has internalized this. Okay. All right, how we doing, class? Okay, so I was thinking about our cultural moment right now and some examples of backlash and blowback that are happening. The unmistakable one is, what was his number? I don't want to say his name. What number president was he? 45. Okay, so he, post-Obama, 45. It was always there, simmering, right? But it was given permission to come out in full flower. So we are living with that and living through that. That would be one. Another one I would think of as a blowback is the are just blocks away, Philando Castile, Minneapolis, George Floyd, Tyree Nichols. The list is much too long. Black men who are abused, killed by people in authority. So let's put their names up here, at least Philando, George, Tyree. Now this one, when I read on the New York Times headline about this, I read it and then I clicked on the image and I gasped out loud at home because the 5 officers are black. I completely gasped because, of course, I presumed that the perpetrators were white. Institutionalized, right? Law enforcement culture that those officers also came out of. And I'm so sorry to say, the third blowback or pushback that I'm going to put on the board today is what's happening in our schools. What is happening in our schools? Public education, private education, K through 12, college and university, graduate level. Things are being erased, deleted, removed from curriculum. How do I even write that up here? What is happening? Ron DeSantis in Florida. Maybe I'll just do that. No, of course it's not everywhere. Of course people are still teaching Toni Morrison and all sorts of great literature and art and history. But for some kids, they're getting dreck. Anybody want to add one more? Examples of pushback, blowback?
Transgender.
Say again?
Transgender.
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah. So we've made progress, marriage equality, and more gay, lesbian people out in the world, and then there's big blowback against especially trans people of color, especially, Molly, right? Okay. But I'm keeping this to racism, because it's also big. Okay, so now the church is supposed to be a place of hope. So I do want to tell you about 3 hopeful things that I've learned of recently in terms of racial dismantling racism and working for more just ways. The first is Robbinsdale Parkway UCC. They are located in Robbinsdale, Minnesota, on the northish end of the city. And they have a very large building, physical plant, and they have 2 other congregations worshiping in their space. So they have their worship service on a Sunday morning, and then there are 2 other congregations that use their space during the week for their worship. And one of them, the first is called Church Without Walls, and it's all African American congregation of people who live on the north side in the metro. And the second is called Jesus is the Way International Ministries. And these are people from Africa, specifically Togo and Liberia, who are worshiping together in Robbinsdale Parkway space. Okay, now that's cool enough, right? But get this. They pay $0 in rent. $0 in rent. And why? Because Robbinsdale Parkway refuses to make money off of black and brown bodies. It's a kind of reparations in its own way. No money changes hands. They use the space, they worship there, they sing, they pray, they gather for free. That's a happy thing to me. So let's put them on the board, shall we? So I'm just going to put Robbinsdale Parkway UCC, and then plus 2. Plus 2 more congregations. Another hopeful thing I just heard on the radio by chance, driving along. Anybody know who Jalen Smith is? Marilyn, I see a couple of heads. Rick? Jalen Smith, he was elected the mayor of Earle, Arkansas, which is really close to Memphis. It's on the eastern end of Arkansas. He's 18 years old. He's African American. He's barely able to vote. And now he is the mayor of the town. And he has incredible spunk. This is what he said. It's a town of about 1,700, and it's a dying town, what we would call a dying town, right? People leave after they're done with school. There's not a lot of industry or art or much of anything. And he says, quote, "Why should I have to go somewhere else to be great when I can be great right here?" Isn't that super? And his top priority for the town of Earl, Arkansas, is to get a grocery store in town. He wants a supermarket so it's not a food desert for his people. Jalen Smith, 18 years old, mayor, leader, visionary, hopeful. I'm going to put his name up here under Robinsteele. Jalen Smith. And the third one is right here in the Twin Cities. We are partnered with an organization called Isaiah. Many faiths, so it's Protestants and Catholics and Jews and Muslims, interfaith, and their whole thing is setting forth legislative priorities for the Minnesota State Legislature. Now, I hope you all know that we're in a great position right now with the legislators that we have, thin margins, to pass some really important stuff. And so I'm going to tell you what Isaiah's 7 priorities are. Here they are. And they've been working on this for a decade plus. Paid family and medical leave. Restoring the vote to people who have served their time and are on probation or parole. And automatic voter registration. 3, clean energy by 2040. The governor signed it. 4, driver's licenses for all. 5, Minnesota Care buy-in. This is expanding the healthcare access and availability. 6, child care for all. That's what the postcard, child care for all, right? More affordable and paying child care workers a higher wage. And the last one is transit for a connected state. Walking, biking, rail. All of those will impact people of color in Minnesota. Transit, child care, health care, driver's licenses, clean energy, restoring the vote, and paid medical and family leave. Now, a handful of us were at an organizing session with Isaiah, and Governor Walz was there, and he was fabulous. And he said, we're going from our wish list to our to-do list. And that felt so hopeful. Things we've wished for years, and people on the ground have done incredible legwork, and finally he's saying we're moving from our wish list to our to-do list. Now, will the legislature pass all of that? I don't know, probably not, in some form or another, but that feels hopeful for Minnesota, and especially for people of color here in our state. Okay, how are we doing here? What does all this have to do with who we are as Christians? The reading today, this is the assigned reading of the lectionary text. This is the assigned letter for today. I'd never read this text before. It's like, okay. Paul is talking about foundations. What are the foundations? Is it Paul or Apollos? Is it 45 or Biden? Or is it the way of Jesus? These will come and go. The way of Jesus, the path, the God-Christ Spirit, that's the foundation. When all of this is swirling, doing damage, raising our hopes, we got to have the foundation of Jesus, the Christ, underneath us, or we will fall apart as Christians. Now, other faiths have their own frameworks. But Paul is saying without the foundation, There's going to be gold and hay and rust and straw and 45 and Biden, and people will come and go, things will come and go, but without that under our feet, we are lost. So, I thought, what are the foundations of the United States? Okay, Civics 101. That's another thing. Why aren't they teaching civics anymore? Why is that? Okay, I would say foundations of the U.S. Freedom, right? Justice, independence. What else would you add? The values that we claim are American values. Equality, opportunity, free speech, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. What's on our dollar bill? In God we trust. And what's the Latin on our money? E pluribus unum. Out of many we are one. Those are strengths of our country. And this is our country too. So let's see. John, will you come help me? Do any of you know the term tensile strength? It's an interesting word. Let's put it up here. T-E-N-S-I-L-E. Tensile strength. Anybody want to give us a definition? What is that? Tim, you must know. This is like an engineering thing.
The strength of material when it's being pulled under tension.
Good. Okay, so what Tim said, tensile strength, when a material is being pulled in two directions, how much tension can it hold before it breaks? So the tensile strength, I would argue, in our country is between that list of freedom, equality, opportunity, freedom, life, the liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and slavery, and robbing indigenous people of everything. Those two, I'm going to put that up there. So Native First Peoples, First Nations peoples, right? So John, you get to be freedom, opportunity, justice. And I'll be this, okay? So we're going to, no, I'm not holding your hands, I'm holding your wrists. You're going to hold, can you hold mine? Yeah, like that. And we're going to lean back and see how much tensile strength we got. Got it? Tensile strength until we break. And we might not break. Okay, here we go. Slavery, Native people, freedom, equality, justice. What's it going to be? Thank you. That's it. What's it going to be? And I think that's the story of our country. And friends, I'm not going to hear the end of it, and you're not going to know how it ends. This is generational work. Tensile strength. Always in tension. And that's the foundation of our country, whether we like it or not. I think. This is all my opinion. Feel free to disagree or be in conversation. I think that is the foundation of our country. Which way? Push, pull, blow back, progress. And then we have, look at the rear view window, please. Look at it right now. And then we have the way of Jesus.